Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Right now in America Decides, a gunman opens fire on the campus of Florida State University in Tallahassee. Here is what we know. 2 people are dead. 6 have been wounded. Police say the deceased are not students of Florida State University. The 20-year-old shooter is believed to be a student, and he is in custody.
The question as it relates to who is the shooter is 20-year-old Phoenix Eichner, and he's the son of a Leon County Sheriff deputy. Unfortunately, her son had access to one of her weapons, and that was one of the weapons that was found at the scene.
We start tonight with Scott McFarland here in Washington and Anna Schechter in New York. Anna, let me start with you. That was an amazing disclosure at the press conference that the shooter is believed to be the son of a active duty Leon County Sheriff's deputy. What else do we know?
You're absolutely right. In fact, we were sitting here in the newsroom, and when we heard that, wow, not just that he's the son of a sheriff's deputy, but that he used a weapon that had been her service weapon. She was able to purchase that, so that was her personal handgun that he used in the shooting. We also learned that he had a long gun on his person. It's unclear at this stage in the investigation if he shot anyone with it. We learned that just moments ago. The 6 injured, we don't know if they are students or not. We're still waiting. They did not reveal the identities of any of the victims. 2 deceased who were not students. We're still waiting to hear more. One other thing that jumped out at me is the suspect, when he was apprehended by FSU police, he did not comply with the orders that they were giving him. He did not shoot at them, but he didn't comply, and at that point, that's when officers fired at him and shot him. He is injured. He is currently in the hospital right now. Major?
Scott McFarland, what do you have?
One of the things they noted is that the deputy is an SRO. They use the term SRO. That means school resource officer. Those are the law enforcement police officers or sheriff's deputies who work in the schools and are specifically detailed to make relationships with young people and, to a degree, in so many school systems, teach safe storage and safe handling of guns. It was that type of school resource officer whose son has been arrested. This is the first mass school shooting of the Trump administration, part 2, which means there are new leaders at the FBI and the new director, the new deputy director, the attorney general, all posted messages today that they've been briefed on this, that they're aware of this. The president was asked about this a short while ago, but before I tell you what he said, we'll note that the law enforcement press conference made clear this is a state's attorney's case right now. This is a local prosecution. There's been no indication yet, way too soon to know if the feds are going to get involved. The president was asked a short while ago whether this makes him want to think about new gun control law. He's already been asked about that. His answer was, well, I'm going to have to look. I'm a big advocate of the Second Amendment. These things are terrible, but the gun doesn't do the shooting. The people do. That was the president in the Oval Office a short while ago. Some of the other things we got from our sources today, Major, were noteworthy. That obviously this is a university that used a protocol in response to this shooting that has been sadly practiced over the years. They had a reunion center, a reunification center for the students to meet up with their families at a civic center nearby. They had those push alerts to send out. Sadly, it's been a muscle memory that's formed, and universities and schools have learned this. And one other note from a source inside law enforcement who wanted to reinforce something to us. There are a number of students on that campus today who were students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in 2018, who were freshmen at that campus and have now gone through 2 of these things.
Scott, you've also been reporting on new gun laws in Florida that might shed some light on all this. What can you tell us?
It's just down the road. It's Tallahassee. At the State House, they have been considering a law to pull back some of the gun control and safety measures passed in the weeks after Parkland. It's not sure this is all relevant to the sequence of events in this case, but one of the components of it was to make it more difficult for people under the age of 21 to get their hands on a gun. Not sure that this legislation is going to end up getting past the finish line to repeal those safety efforts this legislature, but the safety advocates, Major, are quite confident it will be tried again next year.
Scott McFarland and Anna Schechter, thank you very much. I want to bring in Finn Gomez. He joins me here at the desk. Finn, Scott McFarland summarized President Trump's most recent comments on this, leaning into his advocacy of the Second Amendment.
That's right, and he as Scott said, he was asked directly about this in the Oval Office, and he said, you know, that it was a shame, it was a horrible thing, but the Second Amendment, he was a big advocate of the Second Amendment, and something he ran on, you know, as being an advocate of the Second Amendment. So tonally, I'm sure there will be criticism over his comments there, especially you know, so close to this terrible news from Tallahassee. But also,
it is a frequently cited Republican talking point in moments like this. It's not the weapon, it's the perpetrator.
It's the perpetrator, that's right. And that's what he did say. The gun doesn't do the shooting, the people do. And it's often, you know, like you said, it's a mantra we've heard for decades now.
Before this shooting at Florida State University, there was also something highly topical at the White House today. Social media posts from the president criticizing the Federal Reserve Board Chairman Jerome Powell, suggesting, and then the White House rapidly tried to nullify that inferred suggestion that the president might fire the chairman of the Federal Reserve. What do we know?
Yeah, look, at issue is this, like at the crux of this, Major, is that the president has long been critical, very critical of the Fed chair. He wants him to lower interest rates. He has not. It's something
Federal Reserve is an independent entity in the federal government.
Right, it is, and he has said, you know, and he has, you know, he said publicly as much, and then, you know, he did put out that social media post, and then later in comments said, you know, if I want him out, he'll be out. However, of course, speaking to our CBS experts on this issue, you can't do. The president cannot remove a sitting Fed chair. You know, Powell is there until May 2026.
And Powell has said he would resist any effort to force him to resign prematurely.
Yes, and he has said that, you know, emphatically, and that, you know, this is the role of the Fed.
Has there been any conversations inside the White House that the president has been party to where he has suggested that he would like to engineer Powell's departure earlier than scheduled?
There have been reports that, you know, Kevin Warsh, who is a former member of the Fed Board of Governors, has met with the president on several occasions to discuss that possibility. Well, you know, it's something that we have heard externally on the outside from, you know, stakeholders who are supportive of Trump, that there should be a change. You know, the Secretary of Treasury, Bessent, has said in a recent interview that they are going to be looking for replacements following the end of his tenure of Powell's
scheduled end of his.
The scheduled end of his tenure. But again, you know, the president was emphatic, even in the Oval Office a little while ago, saying that if I want him out, he'll be out.
Finn Gomez, thank you very much. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, I want to play for you sound from Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, member of the Senate, someone who has in the past raised questions about Jerome Powell's stewardship at the Federal Reserve, but said this: if he were fired prematurely, would cross a very important and injurious line. Let's listen.
I have tangled with him on a regular basis about both regulations and interest rates. But understand this: if Chairman Powell can be fired by the President of the United States, it will crash the markets. I think what he's doing is testing the waters. Does he think he can get away with firing Powell and all of you won't raise any hell about that? He's checking that out, and I'm just saying, for the strength of our country, I hope all of you are pushing back.
Kelly, put this conversation in context.
Well, listen, crash, markets crashing, that is a very extreme word, but the Federal Reserve is independent because, to ask any economist, international or American, they are able to keep prices more stable than they would if you had the sort of influence of Congress or the president. And so, yeah, there is the fear that if you were to have more of this tussle play out and this to actually go down a legal route, which, as Finn said, I mean, this would be illegal right now based on the law and based on a precedent set by a Supreme Court case during FDR's term, that, yeah, you would see markets react. Whenever Fed Chair Powell speaks, markets react. So if there was the hint that the president or Congress would have a hand in setting monetary policy, yeah, you could see a response from investors.
Speaking of the Fed chair speaking, he did so yesterday in reference to possible efforts to pressurize him to leave. Let's listen.
We're never going to be influenced by any political pressure. People can say whatever they want. That's fine. That's not a problem. But we will do what we do strictly without consideration of political or any other extraneous factors.
Kelly, that definitely meant to calm the markets.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I sat in the room with Fed Chair Powell a couple of months ago, and someone flat out asked him, would you resign if President Trump asked you to? And he said no. And so, look, I mean, he said a lot of other things during that speech that didn't calm the markets, but certainly Powell has his term until May 2026. And even after that, by the way, Major, he still remains on as a board member at the Fed. So his influence at the Fed legally would go on for quite some time.
Kelly O'Grady, it's a pleasure. Always. Thank you. He's vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, one of them. So why is David Hogg looking to take down fellow Democrats? Well, I'll ask him next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. The vice chair of the Democratic National Committee is defending his newly announced $20 million effort to unseat what he calls ineffective House Democrats. His name is David Hogg, and he joins me now. David, let's start with today's news. For those in the audience who may not remember, you are a survivor of the Parkland shooting in 2018. I'm sorry that that is true, and I appreciate what you have gone through. It has led to the activism and activity we're going to talk about politically, but I will set that aside just for a second. How are you processing and absorbing today's news?
I'm thinking about my friends that are at FSU. A lot of the young people who worked with us in March for Our Lives that I had to text and say, hey, are you okay? And thankfully, the friends that I texted are okay. But there's a lot of students from Parkland at FSU. And what really bothers me here is that in Florida, we worked in a bipartisan manner to pass reforms after Parkland. We passed a red flag law that has been used over 19,000 times to disarm people that are risk themselves and others. And no law is perfect by any means, clearly. But we still have so much more work to do. And my message today would be, let's figure out what we know that there's disagreements on this issue, obviously. But we all do agree on what matters most, which is that we need to do something. And we've seen the effects of that in Florida. And it's time for us to come back together again with the legislature in session and for Democrats and Republicans to focus on what we can agree on to make everybody safer so that things like this aren't headlines and they're history.
Second time for your friends to go through this.
Yes.
Are they okay?
I don't even know how to answer that because it's different for everybody. Because how are you supposed to go through it once? This is something that is not supposed to happen at all. We act like these are natural disasters in this country. It's not. This doesn't happen in other countries for a reason. It's because they have a strong regime of gun ownership there in the countries where they do have firearms to make sure that they have common sense laws around it. And let's be clear, this shooting, as the results, as details are coming out about it, this is the product of irresponsible gun ownership. If you're not locking up your guns and your child is able to access it and use it like this, you probably shouldn't have a firearm. And if it comes out that this law enforcement officer wasn't properly securing the firearm, that is a huge problem, and they should be held accountable.
The organization you have talked about this week, Leaders We Deserve, $20 million to primary, possibly so-called asleep at the wheel Democrats in safe seats in the House. Why?
Look, ultimately, our approval rating as a party is at 27% right now with our base. And there's all this conversation that happens around our messaging all the time. And here's the deal. You can have a great script, but if you have actors that are awful at their jobs, it doesn't matter how good that script is or how good the message is if people aren't really able to hear it. And it's not to say that this is about older people. Let me clear a few things up. There's people that say this is only going after older people. That is not true. I wish it was I wish it was simple enough to say all these people above a certain age are terrible, but that's not true. Right? There are great older people like Congresswoman Pelosi, there are people like Steny Hoyer, people like Jim Clyburn and others that are doing excellent jobs that we need to mentor the next generation. And I know if they reach the moment where they aren't able to serve in this role anymore, that they'll decide that for themselves and make the right decision. But ultimately, there are old people that are great, there are young people that are great, and there's also old and young people that are not great either. And what we're trying to do here is not just focus on primaries in safe seats, not frontline seats where we risk losing the House potentially, but give our base a voice and give them people who are willing to fight for them so that we can rally them and get back to winning the majority in the House.
Name check for me an asleep at the wheel Democrat.
Well, right now, part of my hope with this is that some of those Democrats will decide not to run again because they know that this effort is going to be out there, because I don't want to have to do this. I don't want there to have to be Democratic primary challengers
one
in
you
these
could
safer
name?
seats. Right now, I'm waiting to see which ones go out there and plan on deciding to step aside. Because again, I don't want to have to do this ultimately. I want to make sure that we're spending as much time and effort as we can to win back the House. But ultimately, if we have an approval rating of 27%, we don't have much of a future of our party. Not to mention the fact we lost voting share with every single demographic except the older demographic and the highly educated. You don't have a future of your party if that remains the case. And we have to show our base right now that we're doing everything we can to fight back against Donald Trump. And that includes holding ourselves accountable, because the people that vote for us should not be voting for us because we're not Donald Trump necessarily. They should be voting for us because we deliver for them and we give them a better option, not just the least bad of two options that are out there.
Let me let you address some social media criticism you've gotten. Matt Bennett from the Clinton-Gore era. This is insane behavior. John Anzalone, pollster most recently for President Biden.
Yeah.
$20 million should be spent on swing state legislative races, meaning state legislative races, and down ballot, not on this. Steve Schale, a Florida Democratic strategist, saying the DNC's vice chair should be focused on this kind of engagement, meaning engaging in places in battleground states where Democrats have lost ground, not over which Dem in a plus 20 seat should be primaried and knocked out.
You know, look at the last results of the previous election. Those are the purported experts that brought us here. Just to say, it's not personal, right? I don't take those attacks personally in this regard. This is a strategic disagreement. And I want to be clear. All this money that we're raising is not only being spent on primaries by any means. That is the story that a lot of journalists and media run with. We are working.
What are you also going to spend it on?
We're also going to be spending it on frontline seats where great young people are running, right, if they are the Democratic nominee, to make sure we're bringing in fresh faces to Congress. Right now, we talk about diversity all the time in Congress. One of the things we don't talk about as much in regard to that is age. Currently, if we had the same number of 25 to 30-year-olds in Congress as we do proportionally to the population, we would have over 40 people under the age of 30 in Congress. And I don't know if you've looked at Congress recently. We have one that is under the age of 30. That is not good for the future of the Democratic Party. President Biden was as successful as he was, I would argue, because he started when he was 29, which I know is hard for some younger people to believe. But if you look at FDR, if you look at LBJ, they started all before they were 30, and they became that successful because they were that young.
So
and right now, those leaders don't have that chance.
So this is an age thing.
Well, part of it is, but there's also the fact that a lot of our members of all ages, not just older people, there are older members that are meeting this moment. Like I said, like Congresswoman Pelosi, that has spent the past decade fighting back against Donald Trump. But there are members, too, because it's not just a matter of age, it is a matter of effectiveness. People say, well, David, is this just out with the old and in with the new? I would say no. This is out with the ineffective and in with the effective, because we need members who are ready to meet this moment to fight back against Donald Trump. And what that looks like are people like Senator Van Hollen, who are literally going to El Salvador to say this man needs to come back. It looks like people like Cory Booker, who, mind you, did primary somebody to get to that position. It looks like people, in many ways, like Hakeem Jeffries, who primaried multiple people to get to that position, right? This is a healthy process for our party, and I think we should have an embrace of it when it doesn't risk us losing the House, because it's not a zero-sum game here. Many people are saying, well, this money needs to go to just frontline races, and I understand that criticism. But what I would argue is look at the people that are actually fighting right now. They are the ones that are raising the most money. AOC raised over $10 million last quarter. Senator Chris Murphy raised millions, as did Al Green. They are raising that money, and it's not as simple as a zero-sum game. What I worry about is right now, where is the plan from those purported experts that are criticizing this to actually change our party and address the 27% approval rating that we have, because they do not have one.
David, very quickly, for those who would say any party that's in distress, and a party like the Democrats after the 2024 election is clearly in distress, has no time for a strategic circular firing squad.
I wouldn't call this a circular firing squad necessarily. What I would call this is an embrace of the very thing that many of our older members fought to create after the 1968 DNC, which was a further mass adoption of the popular primary process, right? We've replaced those smoke-filled back rooms that they fought so hard against creating with a culture of seniority politics that is killing the future of our party, because the litmus test of whether or not you remain in a position is no longer, are you the best person to be in that position? The litmus test is, well, how long have you been there? That's not acceptable. It needs to be, are you the best person to meet this moment when our country is in crisis and so many of our young people feel like democracy is not delivering for them? Because we go out there as Democrats all the time and say democracy is the most important thing. We have to defend democracy. We fail to acknowledge that this generation, democracy is what put us through school shooter drills and school shootings. It's what's put us through the climate crisis and so much more. What we have to do is prove that democracy matters by standing up to the special interests that are killing the American dream and making our young people lose faith, not only in our party, but the future of this country. That is why we're doing this.
For you personally, is this a John Lewis moment?
I would not ever compare myself to John Lewis. He's an incredible, prolific figure, although he did primary someone to get to that position. So I appreciate you bringing him up. What I would say is I stand on the shoulders of giants, as do all the young people in our party that are working to meet this moment. And what I would say to the people that are critical of the Democratic Party is, look, I am not in this position because I think we are God's greatest gift by any means. I am in this position because I know for families like mine what the Democratic Party can do. And what I mean by that is when my father was diagnosed when I was in 5th grade with early onset Parkinson's disease, and he faced an early medical retirement from the FBI, the reason why our family didn't face bankruptcy was because of the Social Security system that Democrats fought to create and the safety net that we created. What I believe in isn't the Democratic Party that we have today, but the Democratic Party that we could be. And if people believe in that effort, join your local Democratic Party. Be part of the change that you want to see. And understand, the great thing about our party is we are not a cult. You can be critical of it and still be a Democrat at the same time. Sometimes our messaging is a little more widespread than the Republicans, but guess what? We don't have a strongman at the top that excommunicates people because we have diversity and a diversity of approaches and strategies, and we need everybody in this fight to step up and be part of the change that they want to see. So don't just criticize, be part of it and help make us better. That's what I'm trying to do, and that's what all of us can do to build the party that we all need.
David Hogg, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. U.S. officials are in Paris tonight for talks aimed at ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. How European concerns over the White House's relationship, rhetorically and otherwise, with Russia are influencing those talks. That's next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special White House Envoy Steve Witkoff are in Paris today for meetings on the war in Ukraine. Both European and Ukrainian officials are significantly taking part in these discussions. Witkoff, by the way, will also be meeting with Iranian officials in Rome over the weekend about the future of Iran's nuclear program. I'm joined now by Seth Jones. He is the president of the Defense and Security Department at the Center for Strategic and International Studies to talk about the status of Russia-Ukraine talks. Seth, it has been said by many that the Russians have a well-established pattern in moments like this. Create lots of different places which talks can occur. Meanwhile, you carry out all of your strategic aims while the talks seemingly go nowhere. Is that what's happening?
I think that's exactly what's happening. You know, it's interesting watching the Russians do this in Syria during the war in Syria. Russians really get involved in 2015 on the ground. As negotiations start to pick up about an end to that war, what the Russians were really doing was A, trying to make it seem like they were interested in negotiation, but B, what they were really doing is dragging this out so they could put themselves in a much better military position to retake territory. That is exactly what they did. They dragged those Syrian negotiations out for months and years, and they ended up taking back most of the territory with the Iranians and the Assad regime. That's what they're doing in Ukraine right now.
And this is an important time of year in which to do that because winter is ending, the ground is thawing or drying, and then meaning when it's drier, you can advance more rapidly. And lots of analysts I've read say that's what they expect to happen.
Yeah, we're already seeing indications in Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, also Kharkiv, that the Russians look like they're mobilizing for a push over the next several weeks. I mean, the problem, though, is that Russian casualties have been extraordinary. They're moving so slowly and taking territory. In terms of meters per day, it's actually slower than the British and the French during the Somme in World War I right now. So they're not being very successful, but they do have a manpower advantage over the Ukrainians right now.
And there are some concerns expressed by analysts on the outside and Ukrainians on the inside that they may be running into shortages of military equipment and personnel.
And I think that certainly will be growing and increasingly worse over the spring and the summer. And this really puts a sort of major question on, will the United States be willing to provide additional weapons to the Ukrainians? From what I'm hearing from the White House right now, the discussions are within the Oval Office to end all U.S. military aid to Ukraine. And if that's the case, that will really put Ukraine both in a bind in terms of assistance, but also it'll be a morale issue. And it's really going to be up to the Europeans to see whether they can do that.
And to the Europeans, can they backfill fast enough?
And can they and will the U.S. let them backfill with U.S. weapon systems right now that they may need permission? That's a really big question. And will the Europeans be willing to put some boots on the ground in Ukraine? Big debate now.
So on 60 Minutes, you might have seen it, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, invited President Trump to come to Ukraine. Let's take a listen to that.
We want you to come, and I think to come and to see. You think you understand what's going on here. Okay, we respect your position. You understand. But please, before any kind of decisions, any kind of formats of negotiations, come.
Any possibility of that happening?
I think it's highly unlikely. I don't see.
You can understand why he's making the invitation.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've been there. I mean, I think I've been there. I've been in the, you know, it's not just being in Zelensky's office and listening to the briefings. I've done that. It's also moving around Ukraine, hearing the sirens go off, knowing that there are incoming ballistic or cruise missiles or drones in Ukrainian cities. You feel the war and sort of the Russian intimidation that you can't do by sitting back here. And so I think it would be critical. I mean, every president in general has visited a war zone area where there are either U.S. forces or U.S. aid, but I just don't think either the president or vice president look like they're likely to go.
And when the world hears the president, as he said earlier this week, imply that it was Ukraine who started this war, what is it to conclude?
Well, I mean, the reality is crystal clear. You know, the U.S. intelligence was crystal clear. This was a Russian offensive operation, a Russian invasion. It strains credibility when statements like that they're just so patently false. And I think that's been the response in London and Paris and Berlin. How can you say everyone knows that this was an invasion, a Russian invasion?
And very quickly, how do you think that's heard in Moscow?
Oh, this sounds like capitulation. This sounds like I mean, it's exactly what they want to hear, and this sounds like they have the upper hand in the negotiations.
Seth Jones, I appreciate you coming in. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
From tariffs to executive orders, court battles, and cuts to federal services. Well, Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican, or independent rather, from Alaska, getting very candid on all the upheaval in Washington. We'll hear what she had to say next. Plus, more about what we're hearing about the man accused of a deadly shooting on the campus of Florida State University. That's also next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. We're continuing to follow the afternoon's biggest news story. Florida State University, where 2 people died and 6 were wounded in a shooting today. Authorities say the suspect is a 20-year-old son of a sheriff's deputy and, importantly, is in custody. Chanel Call joins us now from New York. Chanel, is there any ongoing threat from this situation?
At this point, police say there is no imminent threat anymore, and that's because they have the person they believe is responsible in custody. So some new details coming in tonight, Major, about who police believe is responsible and how they believe this all happened. Authorities say the person they believe is responsible here is 20-year-old Phoenix Eichner. They say he arrived on campus and opened fire specifically at the Student Union building at around 11:50 this morning. And multiple people, they say, were shot. You'll remember our reporting from around noon. That's when people on campus got that emergency alert on their phone. They were told there was an active shooter on FSU campus. They were told there was a lockdown in place and told to shelter in place. We now know that 2 people were killed during that shooting, and neither of them were told were students. 6 others, Major, were taken to a hospital with gunshot wounds. A 7th person was injured, police say. That person is the gunman. This afternoon, authorities call this a heinous crime. As for what's happening right now on campus, at this point, classes have now shut down for the rest of the week as well. There were some athletic activities planned for the rest of the week. those are now canceled. And, you know, to put this into perspective for anyone who hasn't been to campus, it is massive. We're talking about a 500-acre property, Major. And when you look at that student union building, that police say is still a crime scene. So that is going to be closed off to the public as well as students for now.
Chanel Call, thank you very much for that update. I appreciate it. Joined now by our political panel. Amar Moussa was Director of Rapid Response for Vice President Harris's campaign. Kevin Sheridan, a regular participant at this desk, former spokesperson for the Republican National Committee and a former senior advisor way back when for the Romney-Ryan campaign of 2012. Amar, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. I don't know, did you see David Hogg's interview?
Yeah.
I'd like you to get your instant rapid response to that.
Listen, this is who David has been. He's always been a fearless and tireless champion for democratic ideals and principles.
Is he right?
I don't think Democrats should be afraid to have these tough conversations in public. I think we have, as Senator Booker said during his 25-hour filibuster, we haven't gotten everything right, and we shouldn't be scared to have these conversations in public. We spent $1.3 billion on the Kamala Harris campaign, and we still lost. And so I dismiss the argument that we should be putting $20 million for frontline districts, and we should have these conversations about.
Do you believe there are asleep at the wheel House Democrats?
I think we could be better as a party. I definitely do.
Kevin, you're gloating over there with a face that's almost beatific. Weigh in, please.
Well, they're both right that they're at 27% in the polls as a party, and that might as well try something new. However, I was at a campaign committee, and the #1 job of the campaign committee was to protect your incumbents and make sure that they're resourced enough and unity inside the party. However,
I would say that, let me ask you this, because you went through a postmortem after 2012, where a lot of Republicans were asking what went wrong. This was a winnable race. How is that conversation best handled? And is it best handled quietly internally or externally with primaries for people perceived by one or another as ineffective within the...
Well, the RNC that conducted that, I was long gone by then, but they got everything wrong. Because Donald Trump came down the escalator and said exactly the opposite of
what the autopsy report was after 2012.
It might take an outsider for a Democrat to emerge like Donald Trump did. He's one of one, obviously, so I don't know if there's anybody out there like that. But some new ideas are probably going to have to emerge for the Democrats to come back. They're in a rough place right now.
I want to play for both of you something that Lisa Murkowski, independent senator from Alaska, said at a town hall event yesterday. Let's listen.
We are all afraid. I'm oftentimes very anxious myself about using my voice because retaliation is real.
So the first thing the senator needs is a better handheld microphone. If you didn't catch all that, ladies and gentlemen, she said she's afraid retaliation is real, trying to find her voice as a sitting United States senator. Amar, what's your response?
I mean, Senator Murkowski is saying the quiet part out loud, that this is a Republican Party that has completely given itself up to Donald Trump. This isn't your grandfather's this is actually not Kevin's Republican Party of 2012 when he was working for Senator Romney and Paul Ryan. This is a Republican Party that doesn't believe in the Constitution, openly talking about running Donald Trump for a third term. It's a Republican Party that doesn't believe in free trade anymore with a reckless tariff strategy that's raising costs on families. It's a Republican Party that doesn't believe in the rule of law anymore, openly flouting the Supreme Court and court rulings. So I think every American should hear what Senator Murkowski is saying and be afraid of what this means for the future of the Republican Party.
The retaliation is real part, Kevin. True?
Senator Murkowski has often taken forward-leaning oppositional positions to Donald Trump.
She got out of the party and she ran as an independent.
And she's an independent.
She's
she caucuses
on her own
with the Republican caucus, but she frequently takes shots at the president. She voted against his cabinet nominees, but voted for all of Biden's nominees. So she's doing her thing. I think you'd have to be much more concerned as a Republican if you heard this come from somebody like anybody in leadership or anybody who's in a swing state district that hasn't gone independent. I mean, that's just not a.
Do you think she is entirely alone
about.
in saying retaliation is real in Republican ranks if you buck the president?
To some degree, it's real, and to some degrees, it's always been there. but in other cases, it's just not. We're going for unity right now as a party. Everybody has to swim together to get these bills passed. And if they don't enact an agenda, they're all going to fail. They're all going to lose. So, and they know that. So it's retaliation and unity are, in the eye of the beholder.
Amar, I want to ask you about something you're very familiar with, George Clooney, and his maybe outsized role in either being a conduit to fundraising or kind of a avatar of where the party thinks its future ought to be. And he recently was quoted saying that Westmore is the Democrat he thinks has the best chance of succeeding in maybe 2028, saying that he is levitating above the rest, meaning the rest of the Democratic Party. How do you evaluate that?
I think also in that same interview, George Clooney brought up some other incredible Democrats. I think we are.
Yeah, but he didn't say any of them were levitating above the rest.
I mean, Westmore is a good-looking guy, so it's easy to say he's levitating. But we are very lucky as a Democratic Party to have an impressive bench, especially at the governor level. Across the board, we have Democrats who are at the governor level who are not just acting as bulwarks against the Trump administration, but are actively working to make the lives of their constituents better. And hopefully in 2028, all of them will have a really good platform to run on. Does George Clooney need a woodshed moment for what he did? And the books are now describing in minute detail to President Biden with his op-ed in the New York Times? No, I don't think so. I think that there were a lot of factors that were happening last summer, as we all famously remember. But I think George Clooney is well within his right to publish the op-ed that he did, and President Biden made the decision that he made. And that's all you have to say on that? That's all I have to say. Do you think Westmore is a serious person the Republicans, as they think about a post-Trump future, whether there is or isn't one, and we'll find out in due course?
I don't think he concerns. Look, he's in some ways an impressive governor, but I don't think he's on anybody's radar in the Republican Party too high right now. I think AOC is actually probably the front runner. How do you evaluate the AOC, Bernie Sanders, going to red parts of America, Bakersfield, California, suburban Boise, Idaho, Missoula, Montana, huge crowds, big fundraising? Does that mean taking the private jet on the billionaire tour? Yeah, those two are the energy in the party, obviously. They're raising tons of money.
Do you see parallels to the Tea Party?
Yeah, you could say that. I think there's going to be resistance to AOC running, obviously, from some wings of your party, but you would know best.
Running for what? Against Schumer?
Either Schumer or if she ultimately runs for president. I think she's got all the energy. She's got the money, obviously. She's going to play a big hand in it either way, whether or not she runs for something bigger or whether or not she...
Quickly on that point, you can both weigh in very quickly, though. Do you think that thing that she and Bernie are tapping into is that populism that still hasn't found a permanent home?
Leftist populism, yeah, I think you could say that. That's where it is.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think if you look at some polling that came out from Navigator yesterday, some of the most popular Democrats for primary voters, yes, are Bernie and AOC, but also Hillary Clinton and Pete Buttigieg, and people who aren't, you wouldn't say are from the left populist, and Vice President Harris, Kamala Harris. And so we are a broad tent party for sure.
Mar, if you want to make Kevin Sheridan smile every time at this desk, just mention Hillary Clinton. Mar Musa, Kevin Sheridan, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Texas lawmakers advanced a bill that would provide eligible families with public funds to pay for private school tuition, at least in part. The measure provides taxpayer-funded school vouchers for public school students to attend private institutions if accepted. President Trump congratulated Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Texas legislators on social media today for, quote, finally passing school choice. Restricting birthright citizenship, the Supreme Court agrees to hear a challenge to the president's efforts. We'll have more on that next, right here on America Decides. Welcome back. The Supreme Court said today it will take up whether President Trump can partially enforce his ban, or his plan, rather, to end birthright citizenship. The justices are, for the moment, keeping a nationwide pause on that policy in place. It will hear oral arguments May 15th. The president's executive order would end birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants and foreign residents. Jake Rosen joins me now here at the desk. Jake, we'll get to that in a second. There are updates today from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals on Kilmar Abrego Garcia. What do we know?
Right. So last night, the Department of Justice appealed the Maryland judge's order, who said that she wanted daily updates on where Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is and what steps it has done in the past and is doing every day by 5 p.m. every day to get him back. Lately, as we have reported at CBS, those updates are no further updates or just pointing to the conversation Monday in the Oval Office.
And we have nothing for you on that as the Justice Department court response.
And the judge said that that's okay. She just wanted to make sure that they're complying, which they have. But they said that that was unconstitutional and that they should get a stay and a reprieve from these daily updates, given where we're at. A Ronald Reagan appointee on the Supreme Court, on this federal district panel, said that Mr. Abrego Garcia, regardless of the allegations made by the Trump administration of him being an MS-13 member, regardless, he's still entitled to due process, and that what they're doing right now in, quote, stashing him away in the CCOT El Salvador prison should be shocking not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses should still hold dear. Basically, it was a really shocking 3 or 4 page
And saying that there
decision.
is a collision course coming and that collision course will harm the judiciary and the executive branch. And it basically begs the Trump administration to veer off its current course.
Yeah, and it says this is a losing proposition all around. It was a large chunk of the back half of this order ordered to directly those Department of Justice attorneys actively in this case. Maybe not necessarily to Pam Bondi, right, to those day-to-day attorneys who are doing the job of the Justice Department, saying over the long run, you lose by not telling your bosses they need to be doing this, and we lose as a country because this erosion that is happening is just unsustainable.
Also, there have been assessments made by the administration about Kilmar Abrego Garcia and a dispute with his wife, who's still in America, in Maryland, who's been advocating for his release, and domestic violence allegations. What do we know?
Yeah.
And anything about gang activity or association.
So there was nothing new in terms of their allegations that he is an MS-13 gang member. What they posted yesterday online, and Pam Bondi said she would do as a result of a question in a press conference, was nothing new. We have heard those allegations before. What is new is they cherry-picked some documents out of a restraining order application that I have right here. I went to a courthouse down the road from here today and got it. It lays out that in 2021, he had at least one physical altercation with his wife in which he grabbed her by the arm, left bruises. The night before that, he had punched her and scratched her eye. In a physical dispute, it seemed to be that she says that they still love each other and that they are obviously still married, and she's fighting for him. His attorneys and the family's attorneys say that any criminal allegations, again, to counter these Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice allegations, should still be held in the United States when they bring him back, and that to simply make these allegations on social media is just stirring the pot here and trying to change, I think, the public relations perception of this man as they continue to say that he is an alleged gang member.
And very quickly on the birthright citizenship, will the arguments the High Court hears May 15th go to the merits of the case?
No, not at all. This is simply about these 3 nationwide injunctions. We've seen this push from conservatives across the government to say these nationwide injunctions are illegal. These states, 23 states, I believe, brought lawsuits against the Trump administration over this in 2 different pockets. This is simply on whether these nationwide blocks are unconstitutional. They want to only apply in these specific states and to specific people who have brought these states, not whether it's legal for President Trump to revoke birthright citizenship.
Right, and district court injunctions have bedeviled this administration, the Biden administration, and some before that. That's what the court will mostly focus on. Maybe 2. Jake Rosen, always a pleasure. Thanks so much. That does it for today. I'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report is coming up next, right here on CBS News 24/7.